Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Evan Cheney for Cruel Fan, and today we're going to go over week 10 of the NFL season from a DFS perspective. Um, I don't have a webcam today. The webcam kind of just went to shit, so this is where we're at. We have the screen, though. We do have the screen, so that's good. We have something to look at least, right? So, with that, let's just start with quarterbacks here. And we have some decent quarterbacks on the slate. This is actually a very good slate of 11 games because I think it's the first time ever, really, where we have more late games than early games. We only have 5 early games, we have 6 late. That's actually really good. I think a lot of that has to do with how COVID is messed around with the schedule, but it's fine, right? Because we get 6 games in the afternoon. So it's very good. All right. So as we kind of go on down here, I think it's important to kind of look at these Vegas lines first. I'm recording this on Wednesday, so we have some funny things going on here, I guess. Right? We still don't know who Pittsburgh's quarterback for this week is going to be. Right? Alex Smith is playing for Washington, which is kind of insane if you think about it. And we have some totals that have dropped considerably from the opening, right? You have this Houston-Cleveland game that's dropped 6.5 points. See a little line movement here, even more, right? Yeah, you have Jacksonville, Green Bay going down 4.5 points. Carolina and Tampa's going up a bit. Just kind of eyeballing, right? Arizona, Buffalo's going up, although. Yeah, I know that makes sense. All right, yeah, and then that's going up 2 points that game between the Rams and the Seahawks. All right, and then you also have New Orleans, San Francisco. That's going down. Guess what? 4? Yeah, like 4.5 points. Yeah, that's pretty much the line movement there. Right, as far as quarterbacks are concerned, I guess you would have to suggest that. What is it? Kyler Murray would be your highest upside play of the week here, right? He's 8,000, which is quite expensive for a quarterback. Again, that's a position that I'd rather spend down on a weekly basis, but it be what it be with him up there. And I guess the matchup is good, right? The matchup's fine against Buffalo. Obviously, Russell Wilson was able to do well in that matchup last week. And quarterbacks have been doing well against Arizona all season. Not as good as they have been against Seattle, but certainly close to it. But Kyler Murray's an option there, although I'd rather have Josh Allen if we're looking at the two quarterbacks in that game. Only because, first off, he's cheaper. Second, I think the upside is fairly similar between these two quarterbacks, right? And if you're going to tell me similar upside, then I'd rather go Josh Allen, right? Not to say maybe that he's my favorite quarterback on the week, although he might be. I'd rather have Josh Allen in that situation. Then you look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers, I actually would fade him this week, right? He's going to be the second highest priced quarterback, and I'm not sure game script is going to be favorable to him because, yeah, he'll do fine early when the game is still close. But I think this is one of those situations where it's like, maybe he sits toward the end of the game or they just run the ball a bunch of times. Either way, I just don't find this favorable for Aaron Rodgers. Russell Wilson, I'm good with Russell Wilson this week, right? Going up against the Rams, that's going to be a very high scoring game over there, right? Because even though I think the line may have gone down. I said, what? Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's getting late. With the sun going down so early, it just gets late, right? You get what, 55.5? So that's not too far off. So I would go. Russell Wilson's fine too, right? Because he's had great performances. Even what did he do last week? Even last week was good. Although they were also trailing for most of that game, and so he had to throw the ball more often, which is a good thing for the Seattle offense because Russell Wilson's elite, right? But I mean, favorite quarterbacks, you can look at a Jared Allen or Jared Allen, Jared Goff. I even like Deshaun Watson, Justin Herbert, right? I mean, you can make an argument for these higher price guys. I think if I were to pick a favorite quarterback this week, yeah, actually Carson Wentz isn't too bad either. 5,900. I know Carson Wentz isn't a name we pick on too often, but I think a lot of people are going to be attracted to what he did 3 weeks ago against the same Giants team, right? And I know I said last week, right, when you start facing a team for the second time, you score a few less fantasy points. But I think in this situation, I mean, he's going to have plenty of opportunities to throw the ball, right? And I think a Carson Wentz, Travis Fulgham stack isn't crazy, right? I mean, how cheap are we talking here with that stack? Right? I mean, he's 64 now, which is kind of insane. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty damn cheap. And then you have a bunch of value on the board already because there's a very cheap running back we'll get into when we get there. But I mean, that's a stack you could certainly go with, and it's pretty cheap. Although, I mean, honestly, I'd rather spend up at the position, quote unquote. And I'd rather actually have Jared Goff only because, again, if I'm just building one tournament lineup, I'd rather have Jared Goff because, first off, he's home, which is beneficial for sure, um, just for the sake of quarterbacks. And, you also have, right, what was I going to say? Goodness. Again, I mean, you also have like an all-time worst pass defense in Seattle. So it's like we can think about all these different weird scenarios where Jared Goff has to throw to a bunch of different guys this week, but like if anything, he's gonna throw. I mean, look at that. I mean, that wasn't a loss though. That's insane opportunities. And he only scored seven. The Rams only scored 17 points in that game, but he threw the ball 61 times. That is nuts. That is absolutely nuts. Right, but I think I'll go Jared Goff at the quarterback position there. And then you look at the running backs. If we're talking about higher end running backs, right? If we really want to pay up at the position, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect. Oh, that's why. I don't think they're playing. Because I saw Dalvin Cook in my projections, and I'm like, I don't think they're playing in this slate. And they're not. The Vikings are not. So, yeah. So, I mean, really, I mean, the highest upside guy we can go with would be an Alvin Kamara type. We can go there. An Aaron Jones, even a James Conner. I guess Kareem Hunt is very much on the board here, as well as James Robinson. Especially, I mean, I'd also consider Chase Edmonds. I know I'm just going down the list here, but Mike Davis. Mike Davis is obviously the notable guy you're going to pay down for, right? Because he's starting, and he's only 4,000, so he's going to save you a lot of money. However, I think it's also important to point out some of the dip in opportunities that he's had, right? Obviously, exclude last week because that's where you had Christian McCaffrey actually playing. So exclude that Kansas City game from any of this analysis. But it's kind of a tale of 2-3 game splits with Mike Davis, right? So I mean, I'll talk about the later part of that in a second. But you want to talk about these first 3 games here against the Chargers, the Cardinals, and the Falcons, where he had 16 carries in 2 of the games, right? 13 carries the week I think McCaffrey got hurt. No, that was the 13. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Right, so you have that. They have these insane target numbers, right? 8 targets against Tampa, 9 against the Chargers, 6 against the Cardinals, 10 against the Falcons. right? These were 3 solid games from him fantasy-wise, right? Because he scored 15.5 in a game where McCaffrey got hurt. He didn't even start. Mike Davis didn't start, right? Then he scores 23, 22, about 30 here, right? And then you go to the second 3-game split against the Bears, the Saints, and the Falcons again, where he only scores 12.5, 8.6, and 8.7, right? So, and not just looking at the fantasy point numbers, but also looking at the lack of opportunities he's gotten, right? Because you look at these target numbers from the first 3 games he started. I mean, he had 8 in the game that McCaffrey got hurt in, 9 against the Chargers, 6 targets against the Cardinals, 10 against the Falcons, right? The second split here, 3 targets, 5 targets, 2 targets. He had 6 targets actually last week, which is kind of interesting to look at. And then the carries went down too. I mean, he had 18 carries in this Chicago game, which was actually the most in this whole stretch where he started, right? 7 against New Orleans and only 13 against the Falcons in the second game against the Falcons. So, I mean, I think there's some type of correlation with, as I kind of read around, there's like a correlation involving Curtis Samuel's involvement and Mike Davis's involvement in the pass game, which kind of makes sense because, you're going to tell me that the Panthers have 3 legit receiving targets to throw the ball to. Why are you going to throw the ball to a running back? It's kind of pointless, right? So it's something to think about, right? Mike Davis's fantasy opportunities now are probably not what they were earlier on in the season when he was getting that time starting. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth. However, he's also a starting running back that's $4,000. So you also have to think about that and take that into consideration as well. So, I mean, hey, Mike Davis, I'll still slot him in there as a running back, but just don't be surprised when he doesn't score 20, I guess. I guess if you're going to tell me to put in another high upside running back, right? I guess I'd say there's quite a few guys you could put in here, right? I mean, I like a lot of this top end stuff here. I like Kamara, but not against San Francisco. I actually would rather have Kareem Hunt or Nick Chubb, whoever's going to play. I guess Nick Chubb for now. What type of opportunities can we expect? I mean, yeah, he's not too involved in the passing game, which is kind of a problem. But you also have the Texans who are like legit terrible against the run. So, I mean, I think I'd go as far as to say that I want Nick Chubb. Assuming he's the starter, if he's not Kareem Hunt, I guess, because again, Houston is just all-time terrible at versus the run. All right, I mean, if we want to look at some of these other guys, I mean, we can look at. I talked about all these top guys. I mean, you can look at some of the cheaper guys too. So like a Duke Johnson type could work. Chase Edmonds for sure. I mean, Chase Edmonds is certainly someone to look at. I mean, if you're going to compare Chubb versus Edmonds, I kind of would rather go Chubb. I don't know. That's just a gut thing. I think the chalk position is going to be to go Edmonds here. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I like Edmonds. I like Chubb. I mean, if you want to put Chubb in a flex spot, I think that's how I'm going to make my lineups for now. Right, because you're doing this based on opportunity with Chase Edmonds, right? Because he's going to get a bunch of targets. I mean, if we look at the last 4 weeks here, get rid of all this hoo-ha, right? And we only look at the running backs. Who's getting these opportunities? Christian McCaffrey at 10 targets. That's nuts. Yeah, I mean, Chase Edmonds is fine. Right, he gets those opportunities. Yeah. What was he getting running? I mean, he had 25 carries last week. He'll be fine. I think he'll get it. He'll get there. So I kind of like both of these guys, so I'm just gonna stick that. Okay, let's talk about wide receiver, where Devontae Adams is probably your top guy on the board, but he's $9,000. I don't know if I want to pay $9,000 for a wide receiver. I just don't think I do. So kind of just gonna go down here in the pricing spectrum, and I'd rather put my attention toward guys like um, DeAndre Hopkins, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. That could be controversial. Stephon Diggs, even. Um, you go Terry McLaurin. I don't think he's going to be too looked at. I don't think a lot of people are looking his way. Now, if I'm going to build a lineup, I kind of want the game stack, right? Because if I'm going to have Jared Goff as my quarterback, I certainly want one of his wide receivers. And I think Robert Woods has the higher upside, fantasy point wise, of all the guys. Like Cooper Kupp. I mean, well, actually, hold on. Let's do some research. So let's see in the last 4 weeks, who's getting targets? Who's getting everything, right? So Cooper Kupp seems to be getting more opportunities. He hasn't scored touchdowns in those last 4 weeks. Actually, if we want to look at them, let's just double check. Did they have their bye week last week? Yeah, they did. Let's use 8, 7, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Just for them. So I'll add 5 here. Just to make everything nice. And I mean, Cooper Kupp kind of dominates the target data, right? I mean, they're both getting, Kupp and Woods are both getting the same amount of target or air yard share. I mean, their air yards are pretty close in that 4-game stretch, 324 to 322. Woods has been hotter, that's for sure. But I think Cooper Kupp might actually be the better buy low guy because he's getting more targets, right? He's been targeted 42 times. Was Woods out for one of those games? That could be a possibility. Where is he? There it is. He may have been. He seems fine. Okay. So you know what? I might just say no to Robert Woods and yes to Cooper Kupp. So that's one guy, right? Just for the purpose of this lineup, we want to stack Jared Goff with one of his wide receivers, and so we have Cooper Kupp, right? So I might even want to stack him with both of those guys. Honestly, that's a possibility too that you can make. And that's certainly a more risky strategy. But this week against this god awful Seahawks pass defense, I don't mind, honestly, making that decision. So I mean that's something you could do. And then you have to make the decision between Metcalf and Lockett. Honestly, I'd rather go with a lower projected owned guy. So I'd rather just say, well, that really puts us in a bind, doesn't it? So I mean, I'd rather just say DK Metcalf, spend down at that part of the position, right? So, we have DK Metcalf now. We have Cooper Kupp. Now we kind of need a value wide receiver, right? I mean, who's a cheap guy we can get? We also get Josh Reynolds. Has Josh Reynolds been involved? Not really. Kind of. 27th. Okay, his numbers are off. Because this just doesn't make sense. There's also some other names on the board here we can go if we want like some cheaper guys. I kind of would like to have. I mean, there's a number of cheap names on the board here we can talk about. I mean, we could look at a Josh Reynolds, even a Darius Slayton, a Devontae Parker, who's only 5,000. Seems pretty cheap. DJ Moore is also pretty cheap, right? I mean, that's kind of what's DJ Moore been up to? I also haven't heard his name pop up too much. That might be an issue. All right, so 6, 7, 8, 9. We could talk about him. So I can get rid of 5. Get some Carolina action going. Where are we at? Yeah, I mean, DJ Moore is just kind of cheap. I mean, he has 26 targets in this time frame, 2 touchdowns if that's what you're into. Getting 21% of the targets, 50 or 37% of the air yards. I mean, DJ Moore is definitely someone you can go with. I mean, we need to save for sure for the purpose of this lineup. I kind of like Laviska Shenault from Jacksonville because I know they're going to have to. Jacksonville's definitely going to have to throw the ball to stay competitive in this game. So guys like that are going to be necessary. And I kind of like the idea as a punt, even though he's questionable. So let's go with him. Right. And then we could talk about some of these higher priced guys as well. I mean, Lockett versus Metcalf. I think Lockett's going to be higher owned just because of the price. Right. I mean, the opportunities, I don't know. I don't even know. Let's check. I mean, they're both fairly similar. I mean, Lockett's actually getting more opportunity. So, I mean, we can even swap out Metcalf and Lockett. I mean, now we have a little bit more money to spend for the rest of our lineup. So, that's certainly an option you can go with. Yeah. That's a move. And then instead of Shenault, I actually, what's Jalen Reagor doing these days? How's that going? They just had their bye week last week, so let's add that. I know Fulgham's been getting. Reagor's actually not a bad idea. He really isn't. All right, because he's going to get a ton of air yards when he's on the field. It's just the problem is he hasn't been on the field that much. He had 6 targets in that game against Dallas. He only scored 13.2, but let's just look at that one game. Right, so they played week 8. Was it? Yeah. I mean, everything was pretty close between Fulgham and Reagor, actually. Right? I mean, the catches weren't like what was actually credited for fantasy points wasn't really terribly close, but like the opportunities were similar. I mean, it's 7 targets versus 6 targets, 74 air yards for Reagor, 67 for Fulgham. The air yard share went more toward Reagor. Fulgham got a few more targets. I actually won Reagor, so let's take Reagor. He also gets an easy matchup. And the thing is, he didn't play against the Giants the first time around because he was hurt. So I think that actually benefits him fantasy-wise. So I think that's a good point to go and talk about tight end, which I think, again, for the sake of our lineup, we're going to have to spend down at the tight end position this week. Again, just for building this lineup. I mean, we can go. I actually really like. There's actually not a whole lot to spend up on this week, right? I mean, Kittle's obviously not playing, and Kansas City's on their bye week, I believe. So it's actually worth mentioning, really, all these guys. I mean, Darren Waller is not the worst idea in the world. I think he has the highest upside of any tight end this week, fantasy point wise. TJ Hawkinson going up against Washington might not be ideal, but it can work. Actually, I think Fant, like, as far as my season-long team is concerned, I mean, Noah Fant is one of my top guys that I really like this week. He's just cheap. He's 4,900. And, I mean, let's kind of compare what he's done. 987. Let's see those last 3 weeks. All right, so let's go 9. Let's add a 7 to that. And then we can go to Denver. Yeah. So, I mean, clearly Jerry Jeudy is the lead dog in that offense. Like, I'm not going to doubt that. And you also have to realize Noah Fant was hurt last week for a portion of that game against Atlanta. right? And even so, he still saw 3 targets. Actually, I think a better representation would be to take out last week and just let weeks 7 and 8 kind of simmer. So when you look at the weighted opportunity rating, it's pretty much the same. I mean, it's close. It's not the same, but right. Fant got more targets. Obviously, Judy's going to get more air yards. He's going to be a very good wide receiver. I don't doubt that. But the targets are the same. And again, Fant is cheap. 4,900 just seems cheap. I know he's questionable, but he just seems too cheap to fade, honestly. I mean, there's other guys you could put in this spot. I mean, Robert Tonyan at 3,600 is probably going to garner a lot of ownership because he's so cheap against a bad defensive team. I get that. Same thing with Austin Hooper. I think Austin Hooper is also worth looking at for Cleveland. Because if you want to go, where is he? Oh, he's not even. Yeah, okay. I mean, he's been getting some targets these last, before he was hurt. He was getting some targets, right? I mean, if we want to look at weeks 4, 5, and 6 and compare that to the rest of the offense there in Cleveland, obviously he doesn't have to compete with Odell Beckham Jr. for targets anymore, right? And right now he has, in those 3 games here before he got hurt, he had 23 targets, which was 26% of all the targets. The air yards are competitive with other receivers on this roster. And he was getting the most targets. So, I mean, Austin Hooper going up against Houston actually is not crazy. All right, I mean, it's also $1,000 difference. All right, so I can put Austin Hooper in, and now I have stupid money to spend up on defense with, which I probably won't spend up that much on defense, right? Because I can just take Austin Hooper, take that savings, and then maybe upgrade my wide receiver position to, I don't know, who's a random wide receiver that can work? It's a little bit more expensive. I don't know. I mean, I can even spend up for Tim Patrick. I don't want to spend up for Tim Patrick. I mean, I can say even Jerry Jeudy if I want exposure to the Denver offense. And now I can spend up, for the most part, on all but 3 different defenses. Right? So I'm still going to stick with Fant there because, actually, now that I think about it, I actually want Austin Hooper. Because if he plays, he is elite. No, but I have that. No, I'll just keep Fant. Because I don't want Chubb and him to, not vibe. Yeah, so there's that. And now, now I can spend up for all but the Steelers defense, right? And that leads to a great segue to defense, right? Now, I think there is something to be said about the Steelers defense probably being the best defense on the week, but they were also the best defense of the week last week, and they just flopped, right? I mean, they scored 7 DraftKings points, with 2 sacks. They had a fumble recovery and a pick, but I don't know. At the price, I mean, they were 4,900 last week. I mean, at that price, you needed a defensive touchdown. I think at 4,400, you can temper the expectations a bit. But I still wouldn't want to pay up that much for a defense, right? I mean, I would just say maybe even Packers defense is fine, even though they suck. What about the Eagles defense? Eagles defense is okay. I mean, defense is fairly random, so I mean, kind of have to take things for what they are. But I mean, we can even go on Pro Football Focus and kind of see where everyone lines up. Yeah. These are all just raw thoughts. Yeah. So, I mean, the pressure advantage does go to the Packers in this game. So maybe we could just say Packers defense and call it a day. right? So I mean, and so the lineup that we made here, we have Jared Goff, Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds, Cooper Kupp, Lockett, Jalen Rieger, Noah Fant, Nick Chubb, Packers defense. I think that works pretty well as a tournament team. I wouldn't play this in cash. I certainly wouldn't play this in a GP or in cash in a double up or something like that. Very risky for those purposes, but I mean, certainly good for a tournament. And I guess we'll leave it on that. This has been Evan Cheney for cruelfan.com. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at echeney69. That's at ECHENEY69 on Twitter. And good luck in your contests this week.